All right, welcome to episode 309.1. we had a we had some user error there for a second, but we're here now, and we have Adam Kearney, and he is a writer, a comic book writer, and a lot of other things. But he recently, this week, had a book come out from IDW, and it was Monster Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater, and um, it was Romeo and Juliet. And I know that we talked with Tom Scioli when his Great Gatsby came out, and so now we're talking with Adam about the. I guess it's going to be a series or something. Any idea on that?
Yeah, so it's a series of books. Mine is the first one, the one that I wrote, which is Romeo and Juliet and Godzilla. The next one is announced, which is the Odyssey, and then they haven't announced the ones after that. But basically, it's kind of taking what Tom did with the initial Monsterpiece Theater and doing an anthology version of that. So as far as I understand, it's a different writer every time, there's a different artist every time. And then in addition to the books that we're doing, there's a running story in the background of Godzilla and Robin Hood that Tom is working on himself. And that's being told in I think 5 or 6 page bite sizes chapters at the end of each of our larger stories.
And that's why I figured there was going to be a series of them, because just having part one of a story.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw in a lot of the reviews, people read it, and one of the consistent comments was on the Robin Hood side was like, "Oh man, I was just getting going. I can't wait for the next one." So I think there seem to be a lot of Tom Scioli fans out there, and they really seem to be digging his backup. Yeah, again, it was such an honor. It was so amazing to work on this book and have the opportunity to kind of play in the universe and the style of Godzilla that he created with the original Monsterpiece Theater.
Well, before we really dive into that, because I did a review and I gave you a great review, a well-deserved one. But before we get started talking about that and your other things, tell us a little bit about yourself. First off, as a comic book reader, do you remember the first comic book that you read? Do you remember, what was the one that kind of made you want to continue this? And then tell us a little bit about yourself,
sure,
as a creator.
So I've been a writer ever since I was a little kid. I remember being, 4th or 5th grade and trying to write a novel and stuff. So I've always felt like a writer. And then I've kind of on the side at different times been a little bit of an artist, never good enough to be professional, but I've done a little bit of animating. Most of the work I've done has been in video games. And so, some of the games that I've written and directed have been, Aliens, Batman, Silent Hill. Most recently, we launched the River City Girls series. I wrote all of the scripts for all those and directed about half the game. So most of my career has been in that. But my real love, as far as just as a fan, ever since I was a little kid, has always been comic books. And I remember I moved to my hometown just before I turned 7 years old, and I remember very vividly going to the local comic shop shortly after we moved. So I only would have been 6 or 7, and luckily it was a place that had a lot of very nice varied material. And so I grew up, of course, on Marvel and DC. I remember reading when I was younger, around the era of Batman Lonely Place of Dying, or right when the Carnage was appearing, and it was pre and post McFarlane. I read all that stuff. But the one that I really loved and I started reading right when I moved, so I would have been 6 or 7 years old, I believe, was Usagi Yojimbo by Stan Sakai. And still to this day, 40 years later, I think that's still the best comic book series I've ever read. And it's incredible that Stan is still month after month cranking out new stories. So that's my favorite comic series of all time. And as far as I can remember, that probably was the first one I bought. I went into the comic shop. They had just launched Usagi #1, and then they had some of the older Critters issues that he appeared in, and that was the first thing I collected, even before any of the superhero stuff.
And what about that made you want to get into? And I know that your comic book writing is limited, but you've done Teen Titans Go and stuff like that. How did that inspire you to go into the field you're in?
I think for me, what I love, and so kind of, I'm still in games mostly, but in my short, I have two teenage kids, so it's a very limited amount of free time. But in my little bit of spare time, that's my passion right now is working on comic books. I've got a couple that I've done, and we're working on some more. But for me, I love the fact that you can do everything within a comic book that you get within a big budget movie, and there is no budget. So working with Sean Peacock on the Romeo and Juliet book, we could do whatever visual we want, we could do whatever camera angles we want, whatever crazy visuals we want, and all it is just me explaining an idea and him kind of jamming on the visuals. And I think that's something very unique to comics. It's kind of like there isn't really it's the great equalizer. There's not really like a budgetary restraint in the way that there is when you're working in video games or TV or movies or something like that. Like if you have a very small or a very high budget in one of those, it usually is very apparent on screen or in the finished product. When you do your comic book, as long as you have a great writer and a great illustrator, you can do the most amazing, gorgeous, ambitious stuff. So I've always loved just the open blue sky possibilities of that. And then again, looking back on people like Stan Sakai for Usagi Yojimbo, where he's not only writing it and drawing it, he's lettering it. So it's literally just a one-man book. That would just really amazed me and inspired me as a kid, and thought oh, I'd love to do some of that. For whatever reason, I never really tried to do a comic book professionally until just the last few years, but I'm very happy to finally have an opportunity with IDW and with the folks over there to kind of try my hand at this a little bit.
So let's talk a little bit about, first off, the Godzilla Monsterpiece Theater.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with that, and were you the one that pitched the idea of doing Romeo and Juliet, or did they say, pick your favorite just literature story and put Godzilla in it?
So it kind of came by a good coincidence. So I was actually working on my book that's coming out, my original comic in August, called 13 Demons Dead. I had been working on that with the artist Ilaria going back the last 3 years, because it's a really huge book. It's 250 pages. And our editor on that book was Jake Williams over at IDW. And I knew him because he was assigned to our book, but he's more known as the Godzilla guy. So all the Godzilla books that IDW does, and they do a lot of them, he's the editor on it. And so I think as we were starting to wrap up production on that huge book, I just kind of started bugging him, saying, hey, I'd love to do a Godzilla thing, and throwing out random ideas. And I think I had just sent him an email of hey, here's 5 or 6 random ideas, what about this, what about this? And I wasn't even thinking in the context of Monsterpiece Theater, because at that point it's well, that's Tom Scioli, he's the one that does that. Of course I wouldn't pitch that, he's doing it himself. But one of the ideas I pitched them was what about Romeo and Juliet meet Godzilla? And it just happened to be the same time that they were thinking on their end, hey, that series had such a big success, what if we try kind of an anthology with different talent on it? So I pitched them the idea, but it got approved because it perfectly slotted in with something they were already thinking of doing.
And so when you were preparing to write it, did you kind of go back and see what Tom did with
oh yeah
The Great Gatsby, and try to not really imitate, maybe emulate is the word?
Yeah. Oh, definitely very inspired by, yeah. And I mean, I think what he did, and also Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg, that whole group of guys, their art style, their writing style is so unique and just so amazing. And I was aware of it. I'd already read most of it, and I reread it multiple times before I started working on this, once we knew that we were going to do it. But it was kind of interesting because initially, if you read the initial series that he did, A Monster Piece Theater, it uses the individual works and the individual characters and stuff like that as more of a springboard. Like there is some moment to moment like recreations, but it's not like beat for beat. It's more just about like putting these characters together and then putting them on adventures, and it's really interesting. That was kind of what I think Jake and I were thinking when we started working on this. And then when we got Sean on doing the art, it was initially like, oh, okay, well, we don't need to be like super, dedicated to the story. We can get a little loose with it. We can deviate a bunch. The problem is once I actually got in there and I started looking at it, it's like, it's so well written, and like that is the story. So it's like, there's not much to like Romeo as a character or Juliet as a character, but the writing, the dialogue, the like, do you bite your thumb at me, sir? That's what everybody remembers. And I remember talking early with Jake, and I was like, should I write it in that iambic pentameter style, or should I just do like loose kind of modern thing? And he's like, oh, you could just do it loose, like we'll just see where it goes. And then I realized like you can't, like, you basically, if you're going to use any of the lines, even the famous ones, then you got to just go the whole way with it, or else it's just going to feel out of place. So from that perspective, it was like, I think I started thinking it will be a looser adaptation and more in line with kind of the approach that Tom took on the first series. What we ended up doing was more of a very closely hewn beat for beat with the Godzilla and kaiju elements added. And that was really just out of necessity of like, you're either doing the Shakespeare thing or you're not. I will say though, it was a lot of fun and a lot of challenge to write in that style, to write in iambic pentameter, on so many of the lines, and to like take known lines and tweak them so it's talking about monsters and stuff. It was interesting to do that, and I love that we were able to like largely just kind of pull that off for the whole book, that it never really kind of like breaks the dialogue style or the presentation style of that.
Well, I think my favorite part was, you start off reading and it's straight Romeo and Juliet, but you have Godzilla just in the background doing random stuff, and only certain characters seem to be interacting or noticing that he's there.
And I love the characters, like and I could say this because as a writer, I never feel like I'm manually deciding anything. It just feels like the characters kind of jump into your head, so it feels like they're alive. But I love that some of the characters, like, it's a giant lizard there, everybody should be just running and screaming, and instead the Capulets are like, oh, this is convenient for you Montagues, like, yeah, nice timing with the giant lizard. And they're just kind of like very snippy about it with each other. I love that just the absurdity of that it's like, they're not oblivious to it. It's not like we're just staging Romeo and Juliet and Godzilla's in the background and nothing is, interacting between them. They're all noticing that this giant lizard and these creatures are stomping on people and killing people, but it's not causing them to just completely drop everything that they were already doing and already obsessing about.
Because they're still having the party, and Mothra shows up, and then I think I referred to it as it was kind of your version of Mecha Godzilla, but it was wood.
I realized we never actually named him in the script. So the name that we have, I mean, outside, like, to where readers could read it. So within the script, and I think Sean Peacock already mentioned this online, we called him Automatazilla. So it's supposed to be like an automaton, like, think of those old 100-year-old creepy clockwork robots and stuff. Automaton plus Godzilla, Automatazilla.
Now, was there anything when you were, laying it out that you wanted to put in, but it was like, that's, a little too far, that
Not really. I mean, without getting into like, too much spoiler stuff, like some of the gross stuff, like the heart eating stuff and things like that. That's what I wanted to do, and I was really specific. I'm like, Sean, you got to do this, or when this character vomits, I really want it to look like this. We got it all in. Honestly, the only thing that was not left on the cutting room floor, but just really challenging, is getting all of the beats of that play in within 35 pages. That was really hard. So I mean, I started the first draft and I would ask Jake like, hey, can we do, you know, we could do an extra 5 pages or something. He's like, no, it's got to be pretty tight. So squeezing everything to where we're hitting all the beats of that and all the stuff. And as you go through the book, like, I'm a really big proponent of having satisfying page turns. So it's like you turn the page and bam, there's like a full page panel or like a 75% panel. Like, I didn't want to just have every page be like 12 little panels. So that was the only hard thing, was getting everything functioning within the page count limit. But I don't think there was anything individually we actually left on the cutting room floor. I know the one thing, I mean, I would have liked to have delved a little bit more into the Montague side of the family. We lean much more heavily into the Capulets because I won't spoil it, because of how her dad is tied to things. So if I had one thing I could have loved to have gotten in, and maybe a little bit more of the Montague side, but you know, there really wasn't that much going on from that side in the play relative anyways. So
yeah. I kind of also really enjoyed how you handled like the final scene, the suicide scene.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a nice twist.
Thank you.
And you can tell you're having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, we wanted to do, you know, on the big moments, especially like that. And, you know, I think a lot of that was taking influence from not just growing up on this and having seen, like, you know, the Zeffirelli film, but then also seeing the Baz Luhrmann film was like a hugely influential on me when I was younger. And they all interpreted it, like they all did it differently, like Baz Luhrmann bringing guns into it instead of just the knife and stuff like that. So we knew early on that was something we really wanted to do. We wanted to make the deaths unique. We wanted to have it so it played up the same moment, but they weren't the same that you'd seen them before, and then definitely get to that like nice big final splash of the two of them at the resolution of that moment. That was something we always worked back from.
Now, besides Godzilla, did you have a favorite character from the play that you enjoyed writing, or, you know, enjoyed having a little fun with?
Well, so before I get into the play thing, I am like, I don't know if they'll show up, but I am obsessed with Mothra. I'm like the biggest Mothra fan. And so that was the thing, even more than getting to do a Godzilla book. For me, this was doing a Mothra book. So I love Mothra. I love, like, I have so many toys of her, and I love her in the books, and I love the recent series they did. So from the kaiju side, it was her. As far as the characters, I mean, I was always, again, going back to like the Baz Luhrmann movie, I just always loved Mercutio, and you know, just like how he is kind of in between the two worlds, and very, like, you know, eccentric and charismatic. And of course he has like that very memorable scene with him, and so I think he was probably my favorite character, and I'm sure that went into the writing as well.
So how did anything else about you know, the Monster Piece Theater that, you know, you wanted to make sure that you wanted to say about it, or?
No, I think, like, again, like, I wanted to do it as authentic as possible. So it's, you know, getting, especially in like the chorus sections, which is the Shobijin at the beginning, at the end, like keeping them in that iambic pentameter, keeping the rhymes where they are, but then also tweaking it. So like one of my favorite things that we have in the chorus is, it says, which but their children's end not could remove is now the 2 page count of our page. So we changed the timing to be, it's referring to around 40 pages, which is what we were. So I love all those little tweaks that we could do as far as that. I'll show you that, like, one of my favorite, like, it's just a little like throwaway line, but when the Godzilla is first rampaging, 2 of the characters get burned, just like random party goers. One of them says, I burn, and then the other one says, should that I had remained home this eve. And I love like the silliness of that line. Like, it's all written in Shakespearean, but he's basically just like, oh man, I should have stayed home tonight. But I love that. I love like the challenge of like, how would that gag, how would that kind of like groany like line work in, you know, Shakespearean time? So for me, I loved all those little moments, and then yeah, definitely like working with Sean once I saw the art that was coming in, getting those big explosive reveals on the page turns, and getting the weird stuff, getting the gross stuff, because I'm a big fan of juxtaposition. And so I love like seeing characters that are very like, you know, regal and formal and well composed, and then just like covering one with blood or having vomit or something. But just, you know, I grew up on Sam Raimi films and stuff, so just the more that we could just like run them through the ringer and just get gnarly with it, that's stuff that I really love doing in the book.
I will just say that if this was the version of Godzilla I had to read when I was a sophomore in high school, I probably would have enjoyed it a little more.
You know, it's funny. One of the comments that I saw online was somebody who was an English teacher, and he said like, "Oh, we just taught this in my class. I love it, and I bought an extra copy. I'm going to show the kids." And I'm like, "Yes, that's perfect." I was almost an English teacher. I got into games, but I almost became an English teacher. So obviously, I love the hell out of Shakespeare, especially this play, especially. So yeah, that made me really, it warmed me inside. And I've seen a few comments from people online saying, "Oh, I'm a teacher, and this was fun to read."
I don't know if you've seen them before, but I know that they've done the Star Wars trilogies in Shakespeare.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's well, they've done the original 3 movies, and then the Mandalorian, and I think Ahsoka is coming out, and you know, it's all wow. It's all like a Shakespearean play.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, you definitely should. So let's move to your creator-owned project. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that and the inspirations behind that.
Yeah, I wish I had something to hold up, but that one is not going to be printed until August. But it's called 13 Demons Dead, and it's not a comic. It's a 250-page book. Like, we actually pitched it. The reason it's so long is when I first pitched it 3 or 4 years ago to IDW, I actually wrote it as like outlines for 12 issues, and then at the time they said, actually, this would work better as a book. So we ended up getting this commitment, myself and the artist named Saspy. If you look her up, Saspy, she's amazing. She's an Italian artist. We basically pitched this book, and it ended up being 250 pages. And you know, my favorite works are horror. I love horror. I love horror movies. I love horror comics. I love horror stories. And I think probably my favorite comic outside of Usagi Yojimbo was, in the mainstream especially, was always anything with John Constantine, the Hellblazer stuff. I love just the idea of this like bitter, like necromancer magician type character fighting demons. The demons are kind of being snarky with him, and so I love that kind of blending of, like, you know, it's very like high stakes, but it's also just very familial and like personality driven. And then in my own writing in video games, I tend to just like writing for like teenage characters. I tend to like female protagonists, and so that just kind of popped into my head. And so the story is about this SoCal girl named Everly Espada. She goes by Ev, and she gets wrapped up into this like 1,000-year-old, like, you know, holy crusade, where basically she's the only one, the chosen one, who can see these mischievous, evil 13 demons that are ransacking the world, causing all kinds of misery. And now that she's chosen, they're all trying to kill her, and she has to try and defend them. And I love the idea of, essentially, that's what the book is. It's like, hey, what if you took Hellblazer, and instead of, you know, 40-year-old John Constantine, it was like a 14-year-old high school girl, and she has to deal with the same stuff. And that's basically what the book is.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's a self-contained story. It's not like a volume 1 of, or
it's, the way it works is it ends on it could potentially lead into future volumes. So it's definitely not the kind of thing where it's going to end on a cliffhanger and it's like, oh man, that's not satisfying. Like, this story, we really did wrap up this story. So if you read the first volume, the 250 pages, you'll leave it saying, hey, all of the, you know, threads were, you know, no loose threads. Every, T was crossed, I dotted. Like we went through all that, but we do have kind of a hint at the end of where it'll go in the next book if we get to do more of these, if the first one's a success. So it's a bit of both. It's like it is completely self-contained. It does not end on like a plot cliffhanger. Everything major within the story is resolved, but you can see where it would go if we get to do more of them.
So how does your experience in video games, how does that translate to, your work on, the work you've done with, comics and this other project, which you said is kind of more of a book than a
Yeah. So, I mean, with video games, most of the writing that I do is dialogue driven. So, I've done directing, but we mainly write dialogue and then we record with voice actors so we can put it in the game. So as you're playing around with the characters are talking, and that's the script that we're doing. So I've always been very dialogue focused, and I think that lends itself really naturally to comics. I don't think that I could ever like sit down and write a novel or something in prose where it's like 500 1,000 pages. It's just I'm more focused on dialogue. I love when there's a visual component. I love collaborating, so that's why comics are so fun. But that was something that really helped me, having worked on dozens of video game scripts, knowing how to write good dialogue, knowing how to do laughs, knowing how to do good drama and thrills and stuff like that. All of that I just channeled back into writing this. And so I really do think that, like, of everything I've written, if you've ever, if you're a fan of our Way Forward is the place that I work with, River City Girls, or our games like Aliens or Batman or anything like that, I really think that this book I've written, The 13 Demons Dead, is the best thing I've ever written, because I've learned from all of those experiences how to do dialogue, how to do character development, how to have tension between characters, how to advance the plot in interesting and surprising ways and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely it's very similar in the way that you do it. In other than in video games, you're almost just kind of saying, here's where the dialogue goes and that's it. In comics, the way that I write it full script, and then I'll put descriptions for the artist. So I'll say, like, the character walks into the room and closes the door or something like that. And I think also just inherently, like, the more you work with somebody, the more you get comfortable with them. So at the beginning of the script, when I started working with Saspy, I probably went like really heavy on the description, like, here's the angle and here's what I want and here's blah, blah, blah. Toward the end, she knows the characters, and I'm probably just like, there were plenty of panels where I'm just like, and they keep talking, and I don't tell her anything, because she's just going to do like great visuals herself. So, but yeah, definitely like very, very closely related, like doing dialogue scripts for video games and doing comic book, because it's so word bubble driven.
Now, is there anything that you've learned writing comic books that you feel you can take back into the video game world?
So that's actually interesting, and I did that before, like going back a couple of years. So in video games, you have the playable sequences, and then you have like the cutscenes, and it's always really expensive and a ton of work to do full like 3D cutscenes where the characters are all acting and all moving and stuff like that. And so what we started doing a couple of years ago with the first River City Girls game, so that was like 7 years ago now, is we started doing motion comics for the cutscenes. And so we actually would have an artist named Rem, who works on Devil's Candy, would illustrate the comics just as a traditional comic. So it's like she's actually making comic pages, she's drawing them ink on paper. Then we would scan those, put them in the game, add dialogue, and then we'd kind of move them around. Like, if anybody's ever seen like I think the famous one is like the Ashley Wood motion comics for Metal Gear Solid, where it's kind of, they kind of animate them a little bit, but you're still seeing his art. So we were actually doing that like 6-7 years ago in our video games, and it's just a really efficient way to get cutscenes, basically copying the style of comics. So yeah, that definitely fed right into that, and that's something that once we started doing that, that's been in pretty much all of our games for like the last like 5 years or so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now you're also IDW is reissuing I forget the name, but it's like the ABCs of Fear.
Yeah, it's called
um,
Afraid of Everything, and
Afraid of
I
Everything.
have,
Yes.
yeah, this is the, again, it doesn't want to play nice with the green screen. But this is the hardcover came out during COVID, like in the middle of COVID, but we're reissuing it with a brand new cover for the paperback. That's coming out August, the same month as the Demons book, and that was the first thing that I did as far as publishing. It's essentially A to Z, so it's a, what is it, abacadarium, I forget the term, where you're doing like A, B, C, D, E stories. And I just loved growing up when I was a kid, how dark the horror stories were. So like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Shel Silverstein, Goosebumps, stuff like that. Like, and then I have kids now. I noticed when my kids were young, it's like, oh, they don't really make really kind of screwed up horror for kids anymore. Like, it's all very sanitized, and it's especially, it's just kind of like spooky Halloween stories. So I said, we need to, like, somebody should make that again. So that was my goal with that book, and I started as a Kickstarter, and it's horror for kids. So it's like totally appropriate for, you know, your 8-year-old, your 6-year-old, your 10-year-old, whatever. But it is real horror, has creepy endings, has characters meeting, you know, untimely demises and stuff, but it's written for kids. And the other thing that was cool about it is everything was a one-page story. So basically, you open the book, it'll have the art by the amazing Matthew Cousin on one side, and then on the other side is the story, and it's a one-page story that has some kind of creepy theme based on a different phobia. So I was really excited that that IDW is bringing them back in paperback format, because I think a lot of people missed on it. You know, it was really crazy times during COVID. It was hard to promote anything. Like,
Well,
couldn't do anything just because, yeah, we were all
we're
shut in
talking
our
about
houses.
we're talking about the same time. I mean,
Yeah. So this one, I feel like this is kind of a mulligan. This is like a nice do-over, and hopefully we'll get a nice big audience. And the art looks great. Also, the thing that's interesting for any of your viewers is the artist, Matthew Cousin. At the time I worked with him, you know, back before, like, you know, 2019, or almost a decade ago, was just kind of a freelance artist. He actually went on to become, I believe, the main character designer for the Disney series Owl House. So if anybody loves that Dana Terra show Owl House, they'll totally recognize this art style, because he did most of the character design and all, like, you know, key art, angle, animation stuff within that series. So it was cool to get him on that before he got really famous.
now, was it difficult to find a phobia, I guess, for every letter of the alphabet?
It is, and it's funny, they literally do not exist because it's based on the Greek alphabet. So a couple of them we had to just make up. So there's quite a few, but I forget which letters. It's probably about a half a dozen letters, maybe, like, you know, 6 or 7. There is no correlation with the Greek alphabet, and so we had to completely come up with them. And that's where you see some of them where it's like, you know, fear of video games and stuff like that. It's like, it's kind of BS phobias where we had to fudge it a little bit. But aside from that, if there was a phobia on a letter that was official, we would use it. And then there were just a handful where we had to make it up because they literally didn't have one, or there was only one where it was like a more recent one. It wasn't like a traditional, you know, phobia word from like legitimate Greek languages.
Gotcha. What did you learn anything from the Kickstarter experience, and is this something that you would, you know, maybe do again if, you know, the option presented itself?
You know, it's interesting. It's like I started with Kickstarter, and I love the first one, and it was, I mean, I got spoiled too, because I finished the Kickstarter. It took me years to finish the book, me and Matthew, and then I self-printed it. We mailed off all copies, and then I said I should probably find a real publisher for this book. And we happened to be talking to IDW because they're very multimedia, like they do lots of TV shows and movies. And so from my video game job, we were talking to them at that time about possible video games. And I said, hey, I've got this book, it's all finished. Would you guys want to do something with it? And they were immediately interested. So that's how I got the first publisher. But I have done a couple of Kickstarters since then. it is really hard. I mean, it takes so much effort and so much attention, and just to get everybody aware of it. And then once you do the book, the pressure from people like saying, where is it? I paid, give me my book right now. Like it's so intense just because it's all public. It's definitely much better when we can do something just sort of in the shadows. And that's what I got to do for the Godzilla book, and then for the original book 13 Demons Dead. Both of those were just greenlit and funded by IDW, and then were not revealed until very shortly before their publication. I think that's a much better way to do it, at least for me. Like, I know there's some people that love, like, the excitement of working with the audiences and doing all the back and forth. For me, I'm an introvert, so it kind of just drains me. So I don't know if I'm ever going to do another Kickstarter. I never say never. I've done 3 books, but since I've now got a taste of like, hey, let's just do it normally through like a traditional publisher, for me that is so much easier. I would much rather do that for most of the opportunities.
And tell us a little bit about your experience, because you did Teen Titans Go, correct?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
How was that experience?
That was great. It was that came from at my work at Way Forward. We did a Batman game called Batman the Brave and the Bold on Nintendo Wii, and the whole pitch of that game was like, we looked at the TV show and it's like, oh, they just never stop talking. They're just like always talking, always laughing, and you're making jokes and stuff like that. And so we said, well, I guess that's what the game should be. Like, you're running, but it's one of those games where it's like the entire time you're playing the game, they're just talking back and forth. And that was us trying to match the tone of the show. And Warner Brothers really liked the game, to the point where Sam Register, he's the head of Warner Brothers Animation, was aware of it. And I had talked to him a little bit, and I said, hey, I'd love to write for TV sometime. And he was like, oh yeah, totally, like, I love the game. And so he hooked me up with Michael Jellinek and Aaron Horvath to work on Teen Titans Go. And so I got to write two episodes early. I think it was season 1 or season 2, maybe season 2. And it was so much fun. It was like, I went into their office, we broke story, which means like you're bouncing ideas back and forth. It's like, no, that's stupid. No, how about this? And then once we had the story, then I would go off and write it. So I only got to do 2. That's the only TV I've done, is those 2 episodes, but really had a lot of fun. I'd love to do more. And those guys are on fire now, because they were the showrunners for Teen Titans Go. Now they're more famous as the co-directors of both Super Mario movies, including the one that's in theaters right now. So yeah, the 2 guys that I worked with, my bosses on that, are now the Super Mario Brothers co-directors.
Nice. I just saw the new movie the other night.
Oh, what'd you think? I haven't seen it yet.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it as a sequel, it really works well.
Yeah, my daughter's seen it. The rest of our family has not seen it. Maybe this weekend.
Oh, my son's a big Mario fan, so we had to go see it, on the first weekend it was out. So
yeah, I'm excited, because when I was a kid, I was much more into Super Mario 2 than Super Mario 1 and 3. Like, I like the picking up the vegetables and wart and Birdo and all that. And from what I've heard and seen in trailers, there's a little bit more of that in this one.
Yeah, they make an appearance.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So we usually do a top 5 thing, but I mean, are there other? We'll just kind of do a general. You don't have to do 5.
Sure.
But are there any other books that are Godzilla crossovers that you would?
Oh yeah.
like we could see yourself doing, or would think would be interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it was so much fun to work in there, and also I think Jake, as our editor, Jake Williams, and he's the main Godzilla editor. Really, the editors are the unsung heroes. So it's like, I wrote the script, Sean Peacock did the art, but a lot of the structure, a lot of like, well, let's tighten it up here, or what if you brought this character in around here? A lot of that came from Jake's feedback, and so he's doing fantastic work across all the Godzilla stuff. So mainly, I would love to just like do another thing, just to have another opportunity to work with him. But I would say, definitely having done this one, it was a lot of fun to work in the Shakespeare speak. So I would love to either do another Shakespeare thing or something with like a very like particular writing style. So very broadly, I wouldn't want to say too specific, because I almost feel like if I get too specific, then it maybe won't happen. But but something like that, I think I would love to do. Something that I have to be very specific with the writing style. Aside from that, I mean, I love, like, you know, they're doing a lot of, like, you know, cool, you know, flashy, futuristic Godzilla stuff, anime stuff. I saw your I think your post on Twitter was like, you know, what is like the top 5 like crossovers, like, you know, outside of the ones that would actually ever happen. I could talk about like, I would love to do something like Akira versus Godzilla, something like, I just love Otomo, like all the manga anime world. That would be fun. Again, I just mentioned like John Constantine. I'd love something. I would kill to do like a John Constantine Godzilla crossover. Those are the ones that jump to mind immediately. I mean, maybe something. Have they done Evil Dead? Like something maybe Ash Williams would be cool.
I'm sure. I mean, they're doing Evil Dead meets Archie, so.
Yeah, that's true, exactly. And my company, Way Forward, the one I work for, we just did an Evil Dead game about a year or two ago, Ash versus Evil Dead. So I grew up on that stuff. So anything horror-y. And then the main thing I would, if I get another chance to do any Godzilla stuff, I'd really love to go in and play with some of the other characters. So I mean, I love Mothra. Mothra's my favorite. I love the Shubijin, like the little tiny little characters that are her caretakers. I'd love to do something with King Ghidorah. I'd love to do something with Rodan. You know, just some of those other characters that I grew up loving their movies. Whatever is the crossover, I'd love to get, you know, something that plays with all of them in the way that we were able to play with Godzilla and Mothra in this book.
For a book I was, you know, I was kicking. I think it would be fun to see a Godzilla and 1984 crossover.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I mean, everybody, would they even notice him? They just like would be so miserable in their experience, and just I could see that looking up. It's like, oh,
he doesn't exist, or that's Eurasia doing that.
Yeah, that would be plastered on the screens. Like the lizard does not exist. You could do the same thing with like maybe crossover with like John Carpenter's They Live. So it's like with the glasses and stuff, it's like maybe only certain people can see Godzilla or something like that. But yeah, and I love anything like that, like paranoia and like oppressive, you know, world systems and stuff. That's also fun.
I mean, I know it's like the 50th anniversary of Godzilla, or because I know like DC did another mini series with Godzilla versus the Justice League, and Marvel's doing the Godzilla What If stories, and then they're currently doing the Godzilla Infinity Smash or whatever.
I saw that
in space. What do you think it is about, you know, Godzilla and those characters to make them so adaptable to, you know, across different?
I don't know. I think it's just he's such an iconic, like visually an iconic character, that I think it's just, it maybe kind of reduces us to like being kids just playing with toys in, you know, the grass or on the bedroom floor. I think it's just like you have a big Godzilla and it's like, and I've got a Superman, what would they do? And what happens when Batman comes in? And oh, here's Spider-Man, maybe he can wrap him up on webs. Like, I think it's just because he's so huge, because he's got really interesting powers, because he's got a personality, and also just he's known for just being unstoppable. Like whether you're doing something that is like super goofy like Godzilla Final Wars, or whether you're doing something that's a little more serious like minus zero is the upcoming one, I think, unless I have it backwards. But there's all these different permutations of him, but he's always just unstoppable. It's like, oh, I think we got him, oh no, we didn't get him. So I think the idea of you just have this behemoth that can just survive everything, you inherently want to start teaming him up of like, well, can Hulk beat him? Can
Uh-huh.
Thanos beat him? And just like going
Well,
through all those different possibilities.
have you checked out the Marvel What Ifs where they had
Not
like
yet.
okay, because what they did was is it was like the '60s Fantastic Four versus Godzilla, the
Oh, that's
'70s
perfect.
Incredible Hulk, the '80s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, so it
Oh,
was
I'll have to check that out.
you should. It was kind of interesting how they
And that makes sense because I mean, especially like Fantastic Four '60s, and that's kind of the tone they did with the movie. Like, when were they not fighting somebody that was like 500 feet tall? Like that was their bread and butter, was just going after these giant behemoths. So that makes a lot of
yeah.
sense. And I think also, I really think a big major reason why people love Godzilla, and it varies based on iteration of him, is his googly eyes. Like the fact that he has these big eyes and you see the pupil and you see him looking around. I really do believe that if they had not done that at the beginning and not carried that through, and it just became kind of like, more closed and just more like, dark, can't really tell what he's looking at. I think that plays to his appeal. I know I really loved the Shin Godzilla, the ones that Anno did, because they really embraced like the googly eye and like the goofiness of him and everything like that. So I think those minor details, like the little ears and the eyes and stuff, I think those all very subtly make him a more identifiable, appealing behemoth than maybe some of the more kind of generic monsters that are less utilized over the years.
One of my, going back to crossovers and books, and it's totally crazy and would never work, but Godzilla and the Little House on the Prairie series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. So it's like that, I think, scratches the same itch as like what we did with the Romeo and Juliet, which is like you can have the stuff where Superman's fighting Godzilla. Superman's immediately going to fight Godzilla. He's going to start punching him and pushing him back. But I'm more interested in like the people that are just annoyed by Godzilla. It's like we're trying to churn the butter over here. Like, hey, you stepped on half of our pigs or something like that. Like I love that little minutia stuff. And we played the hell out of that in the Romeo and Juliet one, where it's just like, what I love about the play is it's already like just so catastrophic, and they're just hanging together by a thread. Like it is just the bad luck versus bad luck versus bad luck. Like that's all that play is it's just like two people fall in love, and then just the worst thing keeps happening over and over and over and over, and it's just like a bunch of bad luck. And so it's like, well, let's bring Godzilla into that. So it's like Romeo doesn't get the message from the friar. Why does he not get the message? Well, because Godzilla's foot stomps on the messenger, so it's like we're still hitting the same beats, but it's really open for his involvement in a way that that I think can complement it, and not just in like random. It hopefully elevates it, at least for this version of it.
Definitely. And you guys knocked it out of the park, and
Thank
it
you.
was, it was a nice follow up to, the Great Gatsby that Tom Scioli did. So
Yeah,
you
for sure.
you guys met the
Oh, thank you.
met the bar that was set.
I hope people feel that way. I was both pleasantly surprised and disappointed. I went to, because today we're recording on Thursday, Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. I went to my shop down the street just a few hours ago, and they were completely sold out. They had over 20 copies. They said they were gone within a day. And same thing with Sean, the artist on it. He said he went to his local shop and all the copies were gone. So as much as I would have liked to pick up a few more copies, I'm like, that's pretty good. Hopefully that means people are digging it. Hopefully that means that people notice, because obviously these things happen as a reaction to success. The only reason we get to do this is because of Tom's success on the first series, and if people really show up for this and the Odyssey and the future issues, that'll hopefully turn into even more of these things down the line.
And looking back on your career as a whole, and where you are now, what advice would you have to a younger you that you wish you kind of knew then, that would have, I mean, because you learned through the experience, but
I
Learning
think
can be hard sometimes.
yeah, I would say like I was really fortunate in that when I went to college for writing, more than any of the classes that helped me become a good writer, I was in a radio play class, and we wrote our scripts and we edited scripts and we cast the VO and we recorded with actors and we edited the audio. So I think that is like that taught me everything that I would ever need to use later in video games, in comic books, in TV, any of that. And so I definitely, if anybody wants to be a writer, first off, if you want to be a writer, just write and don't feel a need to write what you think is popular or what you think will be, you know, what somebody wants to write whatever you want, write like the weirdest stuff, write the most, you know, you scripts you can in whatever format they are. But the thing that I would definitely recommend on top of that, that I was fortunate enough to have through that class, is learn production. So aside from just writing, like figure out ways to work on a project, whether it's by yourself or with the collaborators, where you plan it, you execute it, you revise it, you finalize it. Maybe you even print it, even if you're just going to Kinko's and printing some copies. But that I think is worth its weight in gold, because you don't need to just become a better writer. You need to be able to execute on your vision and see it through to like a compelling final product. So that would be my best advice is, one, just keep writing and write however you want. But two, you know, learn to complete a project, start to finish, to where you're writing whatever it is. It could just be a story, or it could be a comic, or it could be whatever format. You have finished it and you're presenting it to people. If you learn how to do that, I think your odds of making a career out of this are really high.
Are there any, you know, other comic book characters that you would like a shot at writing? Or do you have a story that
Yeah, no, I mean, so I want to write more. So going back to 13 Demons Dead, I definitely want to write more about Ev, our main character. We already have the second book planned out, so if it's a big success, Saspy and I know what we're doing for that. I have another pitch that I've written that is kind of horror-y, but more like team-based, so I'm hoping that I can get that greenlit somewhere and work on that. That one is with another great artist that I've worked with, Ellie Bruni, who I worked on Yars Rising Atari one-shot with. That was technically my first comic that I did.
Okay, I remember that.
Yeah, thank you. And then aside from that, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, I would never want to, like, even though I know they are doing one right now, I would never want to like work on an Usagi Yojimbo book. For me, it's like, no, that's Stan's thing. Like, I just want to see him do it. It's kind of similar. Like, I don't know if I'd want to do Turtles, just because I love watching Tom Waltz do it and Kevin Eastman and stuff like that. So certain stuff like that, I would love. I would probably be more interested in doing characters where a lot of people have done them, and or they're kind of orphaned, like they haven't had much recently. Like, I've been thinking a lot recently about like Dark Horse. I would love to do something with like The Mask, like the original dark version that Mike Richardson and Doug Mankey did. I think that would be really fun to work on. Yeah, so I'll throw out that answer. I'll will that into existence. If Dark Horse wants to do a new Mask miniseries, that would be very much at the top of my wish list.
Nice. And yeah, when Yar's Revenge came out, I was like, that's for well, first off, I remember the Atari 2600, but as he ages himself. Briefly, how was it working on that and trying to, you know, bring that into, you know?
That was a fun one. So basically, Atari reached out to our company and said, "Hey, we want to resurrect something." This was after we'd done River City Girls, which is kind of our spin on River City Ransom and Double Dragon and Kunio-kun. So our studio, Way Forward, was kind of known for like reimagining stuff. And I wrote a pitch for Yar's Revenge where I'm like, well, you couldn't just lean into it. You could just say, okay, you are the bug, you are in space, all that kind of stuff. But we wrote one where it's like, well, it's on Earth, it's about like this hacker group, but the meta narrative does tap into the bugs and the space and all that kind of stuff. And the folks at Atari really liked it. So we actually got the game greenlit and developed that with them. And I wrote the script for that. And then while they were working on it, they said, hey, we want to do a comic book. And initially they were just thinking, let's do like a little web comic. And I kind of knew, some artists and stuff. And I said, well, we could just do an actual comic. And I've worked with this place called IDW. Maybe we could even publish it. And they were down for it. So we wrote this really cool one shot for Yars Rising. And I think it came out 2 years ago. And that is a prequel to the game. So if you read the comic, that is like the month or week or so, whatever it is, leading up to the events of the game. But it was nice to, since we did that later, revisit those characters and return to that world, and also just see it in a different art style, like, because the game we did, and it's all playable, VO and stuff like that. It was cool to see like the comic book version of that.
Yeah. So are you planning on hitting any shows or?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'm just starting. We just announced publicly 13 Demons Dead, which comes out in August, and so does the paperback of Afraid of Everything. So just as it was just revealed, I'm starting to reach out now and see if we can line up, interviews or signings. And this is the first podcast I've talked about any of these projects on, so thank you so much. So hopefully doing more and more of that as we head toward August. If you'd be interested, I'd love to come back when those books are actually out and
yes,
dive deeper on that stuff. Yeah, that would be awesome.
You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. So that just starting, but I real hope to do a lot of that stuff. I'd love to do like local events in Los Angeles, maybe do some signings. What's tricky is the artist on that one, Saspi, is in Italy, so I'm hoping that maybe we can get her out here, maybe do some like live in-person events with the both of us. But that for sure. And then as far as Godzilla, like IDW is in full steam on promoting that. And if anybody wants to chat about Romeo and Juliet and Godzilla, what a crazy idea it was and how much fun it was, hit me up. Find me on Twitter, just look up Adam Tierney on Twitter, and I'd love to talk more about that stuff with anybody who's interested.
Well, as soon as I saw that they were continuing it, and it was Romeo, I said, this is definitely going to be at the top of my read pile. And then when I got the early review copy from the great people over at IDW, then it's like, and it took me a little while to get the review out because I was doing other things, but I got it out last week, and I really enjoyed it. And it's just it reads great. It's a great looking book, and thank you for taking the time to come on and chat about it with us.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for the review, and thank you for having me on. And I mean, I feel almost like we talk so much on the writing, man, and we got to talk for a minute about just how gorgeous that art is by Sean Peacock in there. I mean, he's done a few books, he's done some solo work and stuff, but I had no idea when we first we were chatting like a few days ago. I didn't know this is the first licensed thing he's ever done. Everything he's published up to this point has been his own creation. He said, this is the first time I've actually worked with somebody else's character. And I just thought he did such a good job. It was so natural. I love how he drew Godzilla and Mothra, but then all the characters and the angles. It's a really complicated script and cut in terms of a lot of stuff going on at once. And man, he just nailed every moment. So all praise to Sean Peacock for sure.
And he also did a great job of capturing the feel that of Tom Scholey's work. Exactly. I know we've said that over and over, but
yeah. I think that was really we got to thank Jake Williams for that, our editor, because he was the one where, as he and I were talking about this, he said, I think I've got the right guy for this. And it's like he's in the vein of that sort of era and style of Scioli's art, but it doesn't just look like a carbon copy of him. It has its own identity. But I mean, Jake knows all the best writers, all the best artists. I was so happy that he put us together on this, and we were just hysterically laughing the entire time. We had so much fun on this project.
Yeah. Again, it was great chatting with you. Like I said, you're welcome back when you want to talk about your other stuff or have anything to talk about. And I want to give a shout out to Kim over at IDW for setting up the interview. And as my co-host likes to say, the world can be a terrible place, especially these days, but do something nice for somebody, support local arts, support local businesses, support local music. But bottom line is just don't be a jerk.
Yes.